What does it mean to be trapped in a box? Can I make my way out of the box? What if there is no box at all? Am I in the box? Or is the box in me?
In February 2022, the Unstereotype Alliance celebrated its 2-year commemoration, and the Out the Gender Box campaign was born. This campaign sought to embody the underlying principles of the Unstereotype Alliance, which is to challenge norms and stereotypes in media, change perspectives, and to bring forth authentic perspectives without the constraints of societal biases. To have the ideas of the next brightest young minds in the advertising sector offering their unique perspectives in what gender is in and outside the box is exactly the kind of work that Unstereotype Alliance strives to achieve in challenging norms and stereotypes.
My name is Mbali and I am a social innovator and the founder of Prejudic, which is a dictionary designed to decode prejudice and stereotypes. But more than that, I just identify as a soul trying to connect with other souls on this journey of becoming, of learning who we are and who we can be outside of the boxes and the limitations that we place on ourselves and others. So when UN Women approached me to do a campaign for the Unstereotype Alliance, it felt like the perfect opportunity for Prejudic to shift gears from decoding prejudice to doing what I feel should be at the heart of all inclusion work, which is unearthing human potential. Through the Out the Gender Box campaign, I wanted to create a conversation with enough space for the multiple dimensions and ways of being gendered or ungendered. I also wanted to create a conversation that could shapeshift without losing the universal truth that we are all human and we all grapple with the gender box. In fact, I would argue that we're all in different corners of the same box, because when it comes to identity, my box is your box and your box is my box. In other words, the way that I see my gender informs the way that I see yours, because there is no self without the other, and there is no other without the self. So on some really profound level, there is a beautiful oneness in being different, because we all need each other, which means that we're all needed in this conversation. The first part of the campaign is a series of conversations we had with exceptional thought leaders and just amazing souls from across the gender spectrum about the journey of living and thinking out of the gender box. I learned an enormous amount from those conversations, and I would like to share my biggest aha moments with you. But before I do, I would like to submit for your consideration the big question that I asked at the beginning of this campaign. And that question is, what if there was no box? What if 1,000 years from now, there were no gender roles at all, just individuals with diverse expressions of their humanity? Who would we be then? Who could we be then? And is that even possible? Now that's a really big and scary question. And I can't say that I've answered it, but I did recall a scene from The Matrix that I wanted to share with you.
not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.
There is no spoon?
Then you'll see that it is not the spoon that bends, it is only yourself.
The Oracle will see you now.
The other thing that I'm always quite curious about is anger. Anger is a legitimate human emotion that it unhinges the best of us, right? Like anybody becomes unhinged when they're angry, right? And that kind of shows up in different ways. And I guess I was talking to my friend the other day, I don't have the answer to this question, but I was saying, you know, is it always going to be the case that whenever anger shows up in the body of a male person, that it will be toxic masculinity, or it will be reduced to toxic masculinity? And I say that because as a Black woman, who's often stereotyped as the angry Black woman, I know how delegitimizing it can be to be angry for valid reasons, genuine reasons that need to be looked at. And even if they're not genuine, right? Just to kind of feel anger as a human being, maybe, you know, maybe because I struggle with mental health or whatever the case is, and then to be reduced to an angry Black woman. Oh, it's just that, because then that creates the kind of full stop that we spoke about earlier on. And I kind of wonder if there are ways that we can definitely hold toxic masculine behavior accountable. I certainly think that, you know, when anger shows up in a male body, just because in general, men are more physically menacing or larger in stature, it can feel a lot more intimidating, a lot more scary. And so I think that anyone with power, whether that's physical strength or any kind of power, needs to show that much more restraint. But I guess I wonder, like, is there a healthy way to create space for male anger to show up? I don't know. I don't know if you have thoughts.
It's such an important and fascinating and urgent question. I think so much of the problem with the way that we have constructed masculinity is, again, this idea of invulnerability. And so you are constantly brought up to assume that the mere feeling of pain means that there's something wrong with you, not the source of it.
Yeah.
So that you then get locked in this spiral as someone who is gendered as a man, that you feel a certain source of pain which triggers anger, but then you get angry that you're angry because and it's just so. What is crucial then, I think, is again this ability to just firstly notice, number one, that you are a human being who feels emotions when you go through the difficulties of life, and that you are going to feel anger at different points in your life. Sometimes it's going to be legitimate anger, and yes, even sometimes it's going to be illegitimate anger that you need to grapple with. Then there's the question of what happens with that anger once you know you feel that human emotion, and that's where I think we must demand more of men, because anger is one thing, but the resort to violence is another, you know, and I think sometimes we give men way too much, say, well, you're feeling this way, therefore you're entitled to express it in this illegitimate way. And I think ultimately we just have to say that there are no excuses, that there's no reasonable way in which, you know, so much of the violence that we see in our society can simply be explained through this emotion. And so there, I think accountability is key. And I think we should constantly reach. Thinking outside the gender box means that we think beyond this, I am this powerless person who can't control my actions. And we have to imagine a masculinity where, just like many women in our society are able to avert turning their anger into serious violence, which is just as likely, you know. Why is it that so many people gendered as men are still converting this emotion into this action? And that's a big question that we as men have to confront and deal with.
I love that.
Patriarchal systems are not maintained by men, they're maintained by the whole society, and sometimes women unconsciously are actually the stronger keepers of patriarchal systems. And so we have to dismantle within ourselves and start thinking about these things so we actually don't box other women and ourselves into roles that are actually sustaining this patriarchal system. And I'm a firm believer in our own empowerment as people to make change. And I feel that women have actually more power than they think, because women are literally birthing society. So the world exists because women are birthing society. So what society are we birthing? And if we're birthing a patriarchal society, we also need to ask ourselves, what is in us that is keep birthing this patriarchal society? What is it that we need to change? So these men that we birth and these women that we birth are not keepers of a patriarchal system, but are actually dismantlers and builders of the new.
That's so interesting, this idea that a patriarchal society can be reproduced by women as well, incubated by women as well, birthed by women as well.
Birth.
Yeah, and it's both.
It's not can be. It's not can be. It is, because physically we are birthing humans. So every human we are nurturing in our womb and birthing and putting out there can either support a more harmonious society or entrench a patriarchal system. And so there is an immense responsibility for women, as a matter of fact.
That's amazing. And I think it was Bell Hooks who said that patriarchy has no gender. Right? Mm-hmm. And I thought that's such a
spot on.
It's such a powerful insight. Now then is the perfect time to ask, do you think, this is a big one, do you think there's any value in having gender at all? By the way, I'm so glad I don't have to answer this question. I'm sorry, but
So my knee-jerk response is no.
Okay.
There's no need to have gender at all. I think that life would be a lot more simple if we didn't have gender. It's because of gender that all of the gender identity expression work needs to be done, which is taxing work that I think many people who don't identify within a binary would rather avoid. It's taxing having to explain yourself to other people. It's taxing having to show up and explicate who you are and why you are and what you are. And so the short answer is no. Gender is not a useful construct, and it should be kind of taken down at all expense. But that's not to say that we don't live gendered realities, right? And so I'm not for a second trying to say that we must forget about the fact that women are not treated equally in the world. I'm not saying for a second that there's any justice in getting free condoms in a dispensary in a bathroom, but not being able to access pads and tampons. You know, I'm not for a second saying that having a paternal figure cannot be something that is healthy.
Yeah.
What I am saying, though, is that if our starting point was not with a very messy gender binary, I think that life would be so much simpler, because then we would be doing things according to our capacities as people,
Yeah.
instead of being gendered and told what our capacities are as those genders.
Yeah. So there's almost a distinction between gender and our construction of gender. Right? And you're saying, for the most part, it should be something that we define for ourselves, and we define in terms of being human and our authentic lived experience and our authentic capacity and our authentic needs and wants, rather than something that is imposed. And that really is the construct, right? So the construct itself is what's really problematic. Okay, so I always say, there are no complete answers, and an answer, I say this over and over again, an answer can be both valid and incomplete. And I think that's okay, and I think it's okay for us to hold that nuance. I think the problem in this particular conversation, in many conversations around identity, that we're sometimes limited by our own need to know the answer. You know what I mean? And it affects the exploration, and I think this needs to be an exploration. So thank you for braving such a big question. It was a big one, and I felt it when I asked it, but it just felt like a good moment. Okay, so what would you say is most often missing? I mean, we've said a lot, but what would you say is most often missing in the conversation around gender?
Probably the biggest thing missing in the conversation around gender is nuance, right? If we forget that this is a nuanced conversation, then we default back into an understanding of binary gender. So if we lose nuance, we lose the kind of caveats that say that there are men that exist that are in touch with their emotional sides and that cry.
Yep.
There are women that are construction workers, There are men who like child rearing and women who hate cooking. Like, we lose that nuance. And once we start losing that nuance, we risk the rest of it, right? Because if we fall short of seeing the nuance in gender, then we fall short of seeing the nuance in many other things, and life becomes a whole lot less colorful. I think that the systems that we exist in were designed to not kind of enable us to be our full selves. We're always meant to be a lesser version of ourselves because there's something that we're meant to be striving toward or to. And sometimes it's okay to just be in the moment and enjoy the moment and like live there without kind of falling back into this trap of a gendered reality that's marked by race and sexuality and religion and all sorts of other things.
And I love this idea of nuance, because it's also about the freedom to contradict yourself from time to time, because you're a human being, right?
Yeah.
And for me, there's actually a lot of false contradictions that say nurture is the opposite of, so being a nurturing parent is the opposite of being a disciplinarian, right? And that's a false binary. It's a false contradiction, because you can actually be both. And so maybe if we could begin to take some of these traits off the spectrum into their own dimensions, almost, we can start to make progress. So now I'm gonna throw you a bit of a curveball, but I know you'll catch it well. It's not even in my notes, but I just want to know, what would you say to a brand or to anyone who argues that playing to gender stereotypes is profitable?
I would say that they are underestimating the intelligence of their audience and their consumer. And I think it's really wrong. And I mean, I want to pick a category where I see this, like skin whitening products. I'm not a fan of skin whitening products, and I think they're a terrible category that needs to get destroyed. But you have people who play into the stereotype that people want to whiten their skin and lighten their skin, and therefore it's profitable for us to keep pushing these products and keep doing it. you can try it, but you erode all of that real sense of respect that the consumer has for you over a period of time. Because eventually that consumer is going to have an aha moment, and that aha moment is going to be, I'm proud of who I am as myself, and the next thing is going to be, I can't believe this brand has been trying to make me uncomfortable with who I am and to push a different narrative about who I should be. And I think that's what brands need to realize is, yeah, you can be profitable in the short run, but just realize that it's not going to help you in the long run. In the long run, you're actually going to hurt your overall business.
It's unsustainable. So many people still struggle to navigate the use of gender appropriate language, as you said, and I think that many of them genuinely mean well, right? But they're terrified of getting it wrong. So then they end up not even trying. I want you to tell me if you think that's legitimate. I want you to tell me what advice you would give to someone who does have the right heart, but is afraid of screwing it up.
So, I don't personally believe that if your heart is in the right place, that getting it wrong and maybe being chastised for it would put you off trying completely.
Right.
So, those people who get, into an uncomfortable confrontation once, and decide, oh, well, then this is not worth it. I don't believe those people were willing to try anyway. Because that is you centering your ego in that instance. I was not met with the kind of response that I expected, and therefore I'm withdrawing my support for this valid, worthy endeavor. So, my advice is simple. You know why you want to learn. You know why you are trying. Continue doing that. There will be instances in which you get it wrong, and people will see that and be like, I can see that you're trying, that's okay. And then in other instances, people will not be accommodating and they will not be forgiving. And both of those, considering the social context that we exist in, both of those responses are completely valid. But the motivation for you wanting to learn should come from within, and that cannot be shaken by external forces. If you truly believe that this is an important thing to do, you will do it, and you will get over the embarrassment and the hurt that you felt when somebody set you straight. So I will say this, if ever there was an appropriate time to use that phrase, when somebody sets you straight about gender pronouns, it's not that deep. Move on.
I love that. And we've had this conversation a little bit, and I was thinking about the other day, and I was thinking, if you're genuinely invested in learning anything, part of that is risking getting it wrong. We'll take an unrelated example like learning how to ride a bike. If you are genuinely invested in learning how to ride a bicycle, you understand that part of that is risking falling off, scraping your knees, potentially breaking a bone, and then getting back on.
Yeah.
And so you're right. It does. How much your ego is bruised or involved really speaks to the level of your investment completely. Yeah. So you've had a lot of media coverage since Miss South Africa, and you probably get asked a lot of questions. What I want to ask you is, what is the one question that you haven't been asked that you wish someone would ask you? And then what is the one question that you're tired of being asked?
One question I'd like someone to ask me is that, why am I a Christian transgender? That is one question I want people to know. And my answer is that I've seen God's glory, and He has been present in my life, and I will never deny Him. I will try to preach His gospel so that people can know that whatever purpose that I have in life, it's all because of Him. So it doesn't mean when I'm transgender means that I'm a possessed being. No, I'm human. I was created with love, and I'm here for a reason. Hear it, embrace it.
Wow. And we know how faith communities and spiritual communities can actually be the most unsafe communities. And it's crazy to me that what you're saying is that because you're a trans woman, people assume that you almost can't be a Christian?
At all.
My goodness. What is the question you're most tired of being asked as a trans woman?
That what is in between my legs. I feel like that is a disrespectful question, because after all, genitalia doesn't define a person's gender. That is a private organ. That's why they call it a private organ. It's in between the legs for a reason. So don't mind your business and leave my business. This is my business.
Thank you. Enough said. Wow, I'm always so surprised at how entitled we can be when we ask people questions, and we actually make it about ourselves and we forget the person we're asking. And I also, like, as a person, I'm constantly reflecting on what is the line between genuinely wanting to learn or unlearn and asking a question from that place, and then violating someone's mental and emotional and physical space. And that's something that I think we're not careful enough about. So yeah, thank you for that. If you had to guess, what stories do you think might be missing or underrepresented in the search results page on gender, especially in the African context?
So, data has shown that investing in women has a far higher return due to the economic multiplier effect, because women reinvest in other women, they reinvest in communities. And we all know as Africans that this is particularly true on the continent, where women head up households, they lead communities. Like my own grandmother, who, like I had mentioned, who had a tremendously hard life. She lost her mother before she was even 4. She was brought up by her step-grandmother. She was married before she was 16. She moved to a small mining town where the only language that people would converse in was Afrikaans, which she didn't know how to speak. She raised 10 kids and had to, provide for those kids, put food on the table. But not only was she concerned about survival, she also upskilled herself. So she became the best pastry chef. She learned how to cook, how to bake. She learned how to sew, how to knit, how to crochet. And beyond that, she had an open door policy. So no matter the time of day, if you were to arrive at her doorstep, she would offer you a warm meal. She served the community and she fed the community. And so she became a matriarch in that community. Now, that's the story of my grandmother, which is a very similar story to, I think, millions of other people's stories of their grandmothers or their mothers. And those are stories of really strong role models. And in my view, those are the stories that are missing from the internet and missing from, I guess, the search results page.
That's so interesting. This thought that even in the information age, so much of our story is unrecorded and unaccounted for and unincluded because of access. Right? And because of proximity to power and access. And I think of how many people don't even have access to digital technology and how many truths they have that are missing from that results page. Yeah, that's so important to remember. Just because voices are marginalized doesn't mean that they don't have amazing things to contribute to society, right? So we're sitting with all of this dormant human potential, and what we're sidelining or marginalizing when we marginalize people is we're marginalizing potential and we're marginalizing creativity. And if I'm excited to do this work because for me it is about unlocking and unleashing all of the creative potential we have, which I don't think we can do from inside these boxes, which I don't think we can do if so many people are still marginalized. So that's incredible.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And like I said, my goal is, I'll give you a tangible example that people don't think about, is I mean, do you know in the world, so I studied archaeology and therefore a lot of the stuff is of interest to me. Like today in the world, we have uncontacted tribes, people who've never been contacted by this world of civilization that we call civilization, and we want to impose this kind of lifestyle on them. And right now, as we sit here, we can't even think about what they're experiencing and their desire to live the world, live the lifestyle they're living without being influenced by us. Yet some people still go through and they try and contact them and they try and change their way of life. And I think that's what we've got to realize is that in this world, there are people who have groups of people who have a particular lifestyle that they want to preserve, that's not harming anyone, that's a particular lifestyle that's of value to the rest of us to try and understand because there's so much value from it. But when we infringe on their rights, we actually infringe on our rights ability to understand the learnings that they have because we assume that our learnings and our lived experiences is better than theirs. And I think that's so wrong because just because somebody lives in an uncontacted tribe and is still using Iron Age implements does not mean that their lived experience is any worse off than ours just because we live in this world and we have MacBooks and iPhones and all of this. The tools are different, but their experiences could be better.
And on that note, what I learned, I did a podcast with members of the domestic worker community. And the idea of the podcast was to frame them as social innovators and as social commentators, even innovators and social commentators, because we were so struck by how much they know about the society that we live in. Like domestic workers really hold a mirror to us in so many ways because they see us in intimate ways that other people don't. So their vantage point is exceptionally powerful. And so we wanted to hear some of their narratives, some of their thoughts, some of their perspectives about solving social problems. And, you know, initially, I think what was the greatest challenge is to get for them to see themselves as social commentators and innovators and people with ideas, immensely valuable ideas. But that was again just this question of giving yourself permission. And once they did, I mean, these were some of the most insightful, most creative women that I have ever met, you know, and also once they got past things like language barriers, right? Because we've maybe internalized an idea of what value should look like, like what package it comes in. And I think that if we can just rework the packaging, I think so many people will unearth so much in themselves, and we will end up with an infinitely better society.
Yeah, I think we need to strip away this packaging idea. So if you call it packaging, we need to strip it away to actually go that every person adds value. You know, I mean, I look at different societies, and this is not a pure analog, but just to give you an idea. Like if you look at us as a society, we're primarily a individualistic society. It's about how can I rise up and how can I do well and how can I get that position and that house and that car. Whereas you look at the Japanese society that lots of people speak about, and they're very a societal mindset. It's about how do we ensure our entire society is continuously pushing up and growing? How do we ensure that everything we do is done for the best needs of our society first and foremost? And I think there's another layer that would be even better, is how do we get to a point where it goes that every single person who exists and participates in a society is just as valuable as every other person. It's the scale of the influence, maybe, look, the scale of my influence versus Elon Musk is vastly different. I don't have 44 billion to go buy Twitter or anything like that. But if you look at it, he's doing a role in society that should be no different than mine. Like he plays a role that's no different from mine, and the role that anyone else does in any other role should be no different. And when we reach that point where we realize that every single person is just as needed, and if you remove that person or that subgroup of people from society, it actually hurts society, I think then we'll start having respect for each other.
When people have to be referred to as they, them, and it's like, yeah, but it's one person. And outside, who are we talking about? Who are these people in they and them? But I tend to enjoy the use of they, them, because to me it speaks also to the multitudes that are within me.
Yes.
You know, and when I step out into the world, and it's again, this is a process of unlearning. I'm unlearning this idea of individuality that was instilled in us by white supremacy. Historically, we've never understood ourselves to be an island, a one person. When we talk about ourselves, there's always the implication that we are talking about a family, a clan, all of these things. When we think, we think in plural. So the idea that I am one person for me doesn't at all resonate. And so that is what they them does for me.
Pretty women wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model size. But when I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies. I say, it's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my step, the curl of my lips. I'm a woman, phenomenal woman. That's me. I walk into a room just as cool as you please. They all stand or fall down on their knees. Then they swing around me, a hive of honeybees. I say, it's the fire in my eyes and the flash of my teeth, the swing in my waist and the joy in my feet. I'm a woman, phenomenal woman. That's me. Men themselves have wondered what they see in me. They try so much, but they can't touch my inner mystery. When I try to show them, they say they still can't see. I say, it's in the arc of my back, the sun of my smile, the ride of my chest, the grace of my style. I'm a woman, phenomenal woman. That's me. Now you understand just why my hair is not bowed. I don't shout or jump about or have to talk real loud. When you see me passing, it ought to make you proud. I say, it's in the click of my heels, the band of my hair, the palm of my hand, the need for my care. 'Cause I'm a woman, phenomenal woman. That's me.
Lehloko Nolo Machaba has made African history as the first trans woman to become a Miss SA finalist 2 years in a row. I reached out to her at the beginning of this campaign to have a conversation about taking beauty out of the gender box, and she quite honestly changed my life. Not only is she unapologetic about being a Black trans woman, shaking the beauty and pageant world, she is also proud to be a woman of faith. This is so inspiring because being a trans woman, God is what people have often tried to take away from her or to use against her. I can never fully express how meeting Nolo has tested and transformed my own spiritual life. All I can say is that she is the living embodiment of how the authentic power of the human spirit cannot be contained or confined to any box. The heart of the hashtag #OutTheGenderBox campaign has definitely been our partnership with creative schools around the country to launch the inaugural #OutTheGenderBox challenge, which is a creative brief challenging marketing, design, and advertising students to produce social media content that answers the question, how do we take creativity out the gender box? The truth is, I don't know. But I don't know has been the most consistent and valuable theme of this entire campaign. Because the more we start with I don't know, the more open we are to discovery. And that is far more valuable and rewarding than having an answer. I will say one thing though. The most important creative work that any of us is involved in is the work of creating ourselves. So I would like to thank every student who submitted this year for having the courage to take themselves out of the gender box. So with that, I say, buckle up everybody, because this is only the beginning.
The community has been on edge in recent months after a series of attacks on 5 black Muslim
Canadian
women.
police are weighing terrorism charges against a 20-year-old man.
Next, we turn to protests in India. They're connected to a ban on hijabs for girls in
4
school.
members of the same Muslim family were hit by a car and killed.
It has become impossible for you to see me without judging my hijab. You dispose of the veil that I choose to wear. You think I'm weak, timid, uneducated? This is my choice. I choose to wear the hijab.
If you are what you say you are, a superstar, then have no fear. The camera's here and the microphones, and they wanna know, the return. If you are what you say you are, a superstar, then have no fear. The crowd is here and the lights are on, and they wanna show, yeah.
Yeah, a fresh, cool young Lou, trying to cash his microphone check 212. Wanna believe my own hype, but it's too untrue. The world brought me to my knees, what have you brung you? Did you improve on the design, did you do something new? Where your name in on the guest list, who brung you? You, the more famous person, you come through. And the sexy lady next to you, you come too. And then the hitman, standing outside of heaven, waiting for God to come and get me. I'm too uncouth, unschooled to the rules, and too gumshoe. Too much of a newcomer and too